I crossed the line with my best friend during what was supposed to be a harmless weekend adventure, and nothing in my life has been the same since. Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome to my confessions. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because these stories only get more intense. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before any of this happened, I was stuck in the same dead-end routine. 9 to 5 office job that paid just enough to survive, coming home to an empty apartment every night. Scrolling through other people's exciting lives while mine felt completely ordinary. Graduation was years behind me, but the anxiety of what now never really left. My best friend Alex had always been the adventurous one. The one who actually lived, while I stayed safe, playing it small, never risking anything that might shake my careful little world. Alex had just gotten this big promotion, suddenly making real money. He started talking about spontaneous trips, living without regrets, eyes lighting up every time he described skipping town for a weekend. I felt the imbalance immediately. He had this new freedom, this quiet confidence that made my safe little world look even smaller, grayer. He kept saying I needed to loosen up, join him on one of his adventures. Just once. It'll be good for you, he'd laugh, that low warm sound that always seemed to settle somewhere deep in my chest. I'd smile and change the subject, but inside something was already shifting. A quiet hunger I didn't want to name. That Friday evening he showed up at my door smelling like fresh pine from his recent hiking trip, wearing that worn leather jacket that always carried the faint scent of his cologne mixed with campfire smoke. His laugh was louder, his eyes brighter, and the way he casually leaned against my kitchen counter made the air feel thicker. Heavier. I couldn't stop noticing how alive he seemed compared to my gray routine. The way the light caught the stubble along his jaw, the easy way his shoulders filled out that jacket. I told myself it was nothing. Just relief at seeing a familiar face after another long week alone. My heart started racing the moment he suggested we drive up to the old mountain cabin for the weekend. Just the two of us, no plans, no rules. I told myself no way. This is my best friend. We've known each other since college. It would ruin everything. I shouldn't even be thinking about this, I muttered to myself while packing an overnight bag anyway, nerves twisting in my stomach like a warning I chose to ignore. The whole time I kept glancing at the door, half hoping he'd change his mind, half terrified he would. The drive up was filled with our usual banter, windows down, wind whipping through the car, but when we hit a pothole and his hand brushed my thigh reaching for the gear shift, something electric shot through me. Warmth lingered where his fingers had grazed the fabric of my jeans. He didn't pull away immediately, and neither did I. That night by the fireplace, when he tossed me a blanket and our fingers lingered a second too long on the soft wool texture, the air changed. I felt the heat of his skin so close, his breath steady while mine suddenly washed. I pulled back, heart pounding, thinking this is nothing, just the cold mountain air playing tricks on me. The next morning we hiked the narrow trail, sunlight filtering through the trees in golden patches. When I slipped on loose gravel, his arm wrapped around my waist to steady me. His grip was firm, warm through my thin shirt, and for a moment I let myself lean into the solid heat of his body. The scent of pine and his skin filled my lungs, clean, masculine, dangerously comforting. I whispered thanks, but inside I was screaming at myself. Stop, it's your friend. This can't happen, yet my body didn't listen. It stayed there a heartbeat longer than necessary, pulled by some invisible gravity I couldn't fight. Back at the cabin that evening, rain started pouring down hard against the windows. Alex suggested we share the only dry blanket while we listened to that old playlist we made in college. The wool scratchy against my skin, he turned to me and said softly, "You know you can tell me anything, right?" His voice was low, close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath brush my ear. The invitation hung there, heavy and unspoken. And in that moment, the space between us felt alive with everything we weren't saying. I swallowed hard, my pulse loud in my ears, wondering if he could hear it too. Wondering how much longer I could pretend this was still innocent. I kept my eyes on the playlist screen, pretending the song lyrics were the only thing holding my attention, but every note seemed to pull the room smaller around us. The rain hammered the roof like it was trying to drown out my thoughts, yet nothing could quiet the way my skin prick led where our shoulders touched through the blanket. His cologne, that same faint trace of pine and something deeper, warmer, wrapped around me like an invisible thread. I shifted slightly, telling myself it was just to get comfortable, but the movement only brought us closer, the heat from his arm radiating against mine. He laughed softly at a familiar lyric, the sound low and rumbling in his chest, vibrating through the couch into me. Remember when we first made this list? You swore you'd never admit how much you loved these slow ones. His voice carried that teasing edge he always used with me, but tonight it felt heavier, like it was brushing against places words shouldn't reach. I managed a weak smile, my throat tight, because admitting anything right now felt dangerous. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting flickering shadows that made his profile look sharper, more defined against the dim light. I could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing, so close it almost matched mine. Or maybe I was just imagining it sissening up, pulling me in. The blanket slipped a little from my lap as I reached for my forgotten rink on the side table. Our hands met again, this time over the glass, fingers grazing with no excuse of wool or accident. The contact sent a spark racing up my arm, warm and insistent, lingering far longer than it should have. I didn't pull away right away. Neither did he. Instead, his thumb brushed lightly against the back of my hand, a small circle that made my stomach tighten with something I refused to name. Cold? He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes. They held mine a beat too long, searching in a way that made the cabin feel even smaller. I shook my head, voice barely above a whisper. No, just the rain, I guess, but inside, I guess, the war raged, louder. This is Alex, the guy who dragged me through finals and bad dates and every ordinary Tuesday. Crossing this line would shatter the safety we'd built over years of friendship. Yet here I was, letting the moment stretch, craving the way his nearness made the emptiness of my usual nights fade into nothing. The hunger for something more, something alive like him, clawed at me, even as guilt whispered to stop before it was too late. He set the glass down without breaking the contact, his fingers now resting lightly over mine under the blanket. The wool felt rough against my wrist, contrasting the smooth warmth of his skin. I could smell the faint trace of wood smoke still clinging to his jacket from earlier, mixing with the rain-scented air drifting through a cracked window. My heart hammered so hard I was sure he could feel the tremor through our joined hands. "You've been quiet since we got here," he murmured, leaning in just enough that his breath warmed the side of my face. "Talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours?" I opened my mouth, ready to deflect with some joke about work or the weather, but the words caught, because what was going on was the terrifying pull toward him, the way his presence made my safe little world feel suffocatingly small and unbearably empty all at once. The almost touch of his lips hovering near my temple as he waited for an answer. It was like standing at the edge of a drop, gravity tugging harder than reason. I shouldn't want this. I couldn't stop feeling it. And in that pause, his fingers tightened around mine, not letting go. Relentless, mirroring the storm building inside me. I knew then with a sick, thrilling certainty that pretending was slipping away faster than I could hold on to it. And part of me, God help me, didn't want to hold on anymore. The next morning the trail narrowed until the world shrank to just the two of us and the crunch of gravel under our boots. Wind tugged at my jacket, carrying the sharp bite of pine resin and damp earth. I stepped wrong on a loose patch and my ankle twisted, sending me lurching sideways. Before I could even gasp, his arm was there, sliding around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The heat of his palm burned straight through the thin fabric of my shirt, steady and unyielding, anchoring me when everything else felt like it was tilting. I let myself stay there a second longer than necessary, my side pressed to the solid line of his body, breathing in the warm scent of his skin mixed with morning sweat and leftover campfire smoke. My pulse thundered in my ears louder than the distant rush of a stream somewhere below. "Thanks," I whispered, voice cracking on the single word, but I didn't step away immediately. His grip didn't loosen either. For one suspended heartbeat, the forest went quiet except for the shared rhythm of our breathing, ragged into close. Inside my head, the same frantic loops spun faster. "HES, your friend. This is Alex. Stop before you ruin the only steady thing left in your life. Yet my body betrayed me, leaning just a fraction more into that firm warmth, craving the way it made the ground feel less shaky beneath my feet. The hunger was quiet but relentless, like gravity slowly winning against every excuse it built up over years. We kept walking after that, but the air between us had thickened, charged with something neither of us named. Every accidental brush of shoulders on the tight path sent another spark racing across my skin. By the time we circled back to the cabin, the sky had bruised over with heavy clouds, and the first fat drops of rain began to slap against the roof like impatient fingers. Inside, the single dry blanket felt like an invitation and a trap all at once. Alex spread it across the tiny couch and dropped down, patting the spot beside him without a word. I hesitated only a moment before sitting, our shoulders touching, the wool ruff against my arm where his sleeve rode up. The old playlist hummed low from his phone, one of those slow, haunting tracks we'd added during late-night study sessions years ago, back when everything between us was still simple and safe. He turned toward me slightly, knee brushing mine under the shared cover. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" His voice was soft, almost lost under the steady drum of rain on the windows, but it landed heavy in my chest. The question hung there, thick with everything we weren't saying. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint shift of muscle as he breathed, and my own breath caught, shallow and uneven, creamed to keep the wall up, to laugh it off like always, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stayed silent, letting the moment stretch until the space between us felt electric, humming with the almost of it all. His hand moved under the blanket, searching, and when his fingers finally found mine, the contact jolted through me like lightning finding ground. Skin against skin, warm and deliberate now. No more excuses of accident or cold. I didn't pull back. Cowled, the ache deepened, spreading through my chest and lower, a slow melting pull that made my thoughts blur at the edges. His thumb traced a slow line along the inside of my wrist, featherlight, and I forgot how to swallow. The scent of rain-soaked wood and his closeness flooded everything, drowning out the last weak protests in my head. When he leaned in the rest of the way, the first brush of his lips against mine tasted of the whiskey we'd poured earlier. Warm and edged with danger, time fractured. That kiss was gentle, it carried the weight of every stolen glance and lingering touch we'd pretended didn't mean anything. My free hand rose without permission, fingers curling into the front of his shirt, pulling him closer even as panic and need warred inside me. We crossed every invisible line that night, bodies tangling under the blanket and beyond it, the rain masking every shaky breath and whispered name. The fire in the hearth had long gone cold, but neither of us noticed. Morning light eventually crept through the windows, pale and unforgiving. Yet when his hand found me again, it was slower, more intentional, tracing paths that made surrender feel inevitable. Each time I told myself just this once, just to feel alive for a little longer, but the loop had already begun tightening around us both. By the time the rain eased, I was tangled in sheets and in him, heart hammering with the terrifying knowledge that nothing between us could ever go back to how it was. The hunger had won its first battle, and I was already terrified of how much more it wanted. Over the following weeks, the secret adventure continued in stolen fragments that felt like borrowed time. His new apartment, with its wide city lights glittering through floor-to-ceiling glass, became our hidden world, where I would slip in after dark, heart hammering against my ribs as the elevator rose. The scent of his cologne lingered on my coat long after I left, a private trigger that made my pulse quicken in the middle of dull meetings. Quick meetings in my car after work, windows fogging with our uneven breaths while the parking garage hummed around us, each one riskier than the last. Even a hurried lunch-hour moment in the narrow alley behind my office building, where the fear of footsteps approaching only sharpened the ache, pulling us closer in ways words never could. I was falling harder with every hidden touch, every late-night whisper against my ear that promised this was still just us, still safe somehow. Yet the guilt grew like a slow storm gathering on the horizon, knowing one wrong glance from a mutual friend could unravel years of careful friendship. He had this new confidence after the promotion, this easy way of pulling me into his orbit, and I let myself orbit, craving the way his presence made my ordinary days feel charged with possibility. The imbalance between us felt intoxicating now. His freedom against my careful restraint, his laughter cutting through my silence like warm light. Then came the night everything shattered. We were together again in his apartment, the city lights casting soft shadows across the sheets, when his phone lit up on the nightstand with a string of messages. I was trying to look, but the screen glowed too brightly in the dim room, and the words burned into my vision before I could turn away. Someone else, another name, playful emoji, IS, plans that mirrored the ones he made with me. The betrayal landed like cold rain soaking through thin fabric, chilling everything it touched. Chest tightened, breath refusing to come steady, as the reality settled heavy between us. He saw my face change and reached for me anyway, voice low and rough with something that might have been regret or just the same hunger that had led us here. I should have pushed him away, should have gathered my things and walked out into the night, back to the safety of my empty apartment and the life I knew before his laugh complicated everything. Instead, the ache won again, sharper now, laced with pain that made it feel even more real. I pulled him closer, fingers curling into his shirt like I could hold onto the illusion a little longer, letting the moments wallow the hurt because walking away felt impossible, like stepping off a cliff with no ground below. In that twisted surrender I accepted it. This new normal where friendship had dissolved into something raw and unfinished, where his touch still carried electricity even as doubt gnawed at the edges. The hunger didn't care about betrayal, it only wanted more, pulling me deeper into the gravity of what we had become. Weeks blurred after that, stolen moments laced with the quiet knowledge that nothing was simple anymore, that every glance carried the weight of what I now knew and chose to ignore. I chose to indulge and keep the secret even after discovering the betrayal, because walking away felt impossible. Do you think I was right to stay and let it change everything, or should I have ended it the moment I found out? Tell me in the comments, I read every single one. If you want to hear what happened next when the truth finally came out, subscribe and I'll drop the next part soon. What would you have done in my place?